Hey, I just wanted to talk to you tonight about something really exciting. It's called a non-binding referendum. Yes, a non-binding referendum. And we just had one of those. And it's interesting that since we just had one of those, it might be time to talk about it and what happened during that non-binding referendum. One of the things to think about is the fact that when you have 22,000 people vote in a non-binding referendum, it's really just an opinion poll. An opinion poll in this case, it separated 51.8 to 48.2. 820 votes separated out of 22,444 people who cast their votes. So what does that say? That says this community is very divided in terms of whether or not it wants a $42 million ballpark downtown Amarillo. So let's dig a little bit further into how exactly we got here. Myth versus reality. Okay, so we're going to try and keep this discussion a little less surreal than what was happening during the campaign, where myth versus reality was more like the Greek Medusa versus Kim Kardashian. But let's talk about how this referendum may have gone if the voters, all the voters, knew that, number one, the ballpark would consume every penny of available hot tax for the next 30 years. I know you've seen the flyers, all these wonderful platitudes and everything else, but a lot of this stuff is not dealing with reality, and we have to deal with reality. So if we look at the year-to-year percent change in hot tax and in hot receipts and civic center deductions, first of all, you're going to see a little bit of inconsistent growth or inconsistent accumulation of the hot tax over the years, but you will see a consistent growth in the civic center deduction. And the reason for that, I think we'll get into in a little bit later, but we see the civic center deductions quickly outpacing the hot tax receipt growth. So if we look at the City of Amarillo numbers and hot tax revenue, it has grown over the years, but it is not keeping pace with the red ink that's going on in the civic center. So if you look at the very bottom here, the remaining hot tax that's left to service the debt is $1.78 million estimated for 2015. But it's important to know that excess hot funds each year have been transferred to the Civic Center Improvement Fund for future improvements. Those are the things we've been talking about making the Civic Center even better, and that would reduce the burden on taxpayers. Current balance in the Civic Center Improvement Fund is $7.1 million. 2.8 of those funds, 2.8 million of those funds have already been transferred from the fund to the cost of the downtown project. Many people have asked about the pro forma for the City of Amarillo. Well, here are the City of Amarillo numbers. We have the parking garage construction at $14 million. The MPEV construction, just for the including the A&E, is $27.8 million. The rest of the fees are spread between the two projects. That's how you get to $32.2 million for the ballpark currently. If you look down here, you've got fee and council, streetscaping for the parking garage, hotel, and MPEV, site demolition of the Coca-Cola property, street and sidewalk demolition, reopening 8th Avenue, and then utility costs. So total project costs for the parking garage and the MPEV are $49.8 million, almost $50 million. So why isn't the downtown hotel included in these numbers? Well, the developer, Newcrest Image, is paying $45 million of their own money to build the downtown hotel. However, we are giving the hotelier investment group $54 million in incentives with a $2 million revenue guarantee and an 80-year lease in exchange. Thank you very much for coming to town and building a hotel, and let us give you $54 million. But I digress. So let's look at the proforma a little bit more deeply. The bond proceeds, $33 million, 67.4% of the funding. That's moved to serviceable debt. Excess hot funds, that's the $7.1 million fund. All of that is being emptied into the ballpark fund and for the parking garage. And we have the tiers commitment. Number one, that's look at that. Comes from property taxes, 5.4%. So much for the no property taxes. General construction fund, 4.8%, $2.4 million. That's general tax revenue receipts. City utility fees, those are the things that come in on your utility bills. 4.8% of that's going to go there. Potter County agreement, that would be property taxes coming from Potter County, and Center City commitment, $500,000. So the total funding sources match the total project costs. So what are the funding sources for the debt service? We have the excess hot funds available at $1.9 million. Now note that we currently have $1.78 million available. This assumes that $1.9 million will be available in 2 years, in 2017. That's assuming 3% growth over the last 2 years. Haven't seen that in the last year to year in the last 2 years, so hopefully that would have to come to fruition in order for that to make sense. The MPEV lease, $250,000. That and the tax receipt is all that we're going to be seeing from the stadium operations. We have two fees, a 10% facility fee, and then the Civic Center is increasing rent. So those have already been implemented 2 years ago. And so if you look at the rate of increase in the costs of the Civic Center and the red ink basically that they're running, that may be in fact what's driving that. So we're increasing our costs and increasing the price of doing business at the Civic Center, and so that's driving up the red ink there, and that may continue to have a negative trend, and it may kind of ruin the whole numbers in terms of making this thing work. We have the hotel parking lease, $120,000, and then we have the public parking fees. We'll get into that in some detail later on, but that's 15.8% of the funding, and the key is we don't pay to park anywhere in Amarillo right now, and if the question is whether or not people are actually going to accept that and engage in that practice of paying for parking. They may just be avoiding downtown altogether. So the total funding for the annual debt service is $2.695 million. Okay, so the bottom line, the breakdown of the hot tax and the property and sales tax and fees. 67% is going to come from hot revenue, and 33% is going to come from taxes and fees. So let's look at what the FOR campaign was telling us. Part of their campaign was a very common thread, was a common myth, is that Amarillo residents will foot the bill for the MPEV and ballpark. As we've seen here just in the last slide, we are paying for 33% of this through taxes and fees. So that is the reality. That's not a myth. Second comment, the reality is property taxes will not be used to build the MPEV and the ballpark. Well, as you've seen previously, the tiers commitment, that is property taxes, general construction funds, city utility funds, Potter County agreement, Potter County monies come from property taxes, Center City commitment. So taxes and fees, yes, we are paying through taxes and fees and property taxes. Thank you very much. So that is also a myth. Rather, hotel occupancy taxes and private dollars will be used. Visitors to our city are funding this, not our residents. So again, let's take a look at this, guys. 33% we're covering the cost of this facility. So that is a myth. All right, let's have a quick chat about stadium economics. There are 3 activities that must be considered in any credible sports stadium economic feasibility study. Those 3 things are replacement, crowding out, and leakage. So let's look at replacement real quick. So we have the Civic Center, and we also have these events that typically go to the Civic Center on a routine basis. Now that we have the ballpark showing up, there's some concern, and actually the top billing for the ballpark is that we are going to get concerts, ice skating, car shows, all these other things that are actually going to be taking away and competing directly with the Civic Center for what they currently do. What that's going to lead to is we're going to have an operator profit and sales taxes coming from the ballpark, and we're going to see lost revenue and increased losses to add to the trends that we're already seeing there. That's called replacement. Crowding out. Large events basically create congestion and discourage non-event consumers to stay away. So someone who would ordinarily, maybe they're not a baseball fan, but they like to go downtown to have dinner, they're going to say, oh, geez, the game's on. There's no parking anywhere downtown because there's so many people. We're just not going to go. Or people do want to go downtown, and they have they're not able to park anywhere close to the place that they want to go eat at, and so they also avoid. Leakage. Leakage is a significant disincentive, and it drives consumers and businesses to other areas. So leakage can be in terms of high development costs, costs of doing business, and consumption costs. So one of the causes of leakage in this situation in Amarillo would be the parking garage. The parking garage proforma assumes paid street parking. So we're going to build the parking garage. We're going to charge people to park there. And in order to make that work, we have to force everyone else to pay to park on the street. So there's going to be parking meters that go in place. There's going to be the parking garage, obviously. And so in order for everything to work and people to pay to park in the parking garage, we're going to have to force people to pay to park on the street throughout downtown, as you see here. Cost of rehabbing old properties to code is another source of leakage. The cost of downtown streetscaping requirements and the cost of time delays seeking and obtaining multiple approvals. It's significant if you've talked to any developers downtown who can be candid with you. I've heard that time and again that people have to go to multiple boards, multiple points of approval to get approval for their plans, and sometimes those multiple points can't even agree among each other. So, if a baseball park feasibility study does not address replacement, crowding out, or leakage, it's not reliable. And for goodness sakes, even HBO is talking about this. So these are credible concerns, and the next feasibility study has to address these things. So let's look at two more facts. So when you were told the ballpark would create 76 jobs, right? We were told that. What if you were also told that those 76 jobs had an average salary of $14,000 a year? That was reality. Okay, then what if you were told that when the ballpark created $5.1 million in total taxable revenue? What if you were also told that $5.1 million was the value 30 years from now, but in today's dollars, it's just $70,000 a year? That's reality. So $70,000 a year in tax revenue, how many police officers will that hire? And how many streets will that fix? Not many. So great, you've got to see the numbers. You want to know, where do they come from? All the numbers are found here in the feasibility study for a new ballpark in downtown, dated November 22nd, 2010. That's where you will find on one of the last pages in the document, the $5.1 million in over 30 years in taxable revenue, the 72 jobs paying $14,000, and of course the one concert. We didn't actually talk about that, but yes, it's one concert in the feasibility study. And it's for 3,000 people, not 9,000 people, 8,000 people, what have you, 3,000 people. So again, it's not 30 concerts, 20 concerts, 15 concerts, 40 concerts, 9 concerts, 8 concerts. It's one concert according to the CSL study. And now, here's where things get interesting. So just imagine for a moment that you have a clinical study that you're going to bring to your doctor, and you're going to say, hey doc, I'd like for you to check out this clinical study because it sounds really cool. So what's the doctor first going to do? The doctor's first going to look at the clinical study and determine whether or not the methods are sound, the data is sound, and whatnot. Maybe he'll flip over to the first page of the clinical study and say, what do the authors tell us about their results in their study? So no matter what the results are in the study, if the authors tell you, let's see, number one, we got data that we didn't know the source of. Number two, we don't really trust the data. And number three, it hasn't been validated. And number four, you probably shouldn't use the results of this study to make any decisions on. What do you think that doctor is going to do? If that doctor allows the patient to undergo the therapy that the study calls for, that's called malpractice. So how's that any different in public policy? You know, I was thinking the same thing. So if we look at the feasibility study, go back to that first page, and actually peel back the cover, you're going to see the second page. And the second page has some interesting language in the second paragraph. There's a lot of information here. I've highlighted it, but I'd like to kind of pick it apart real quick. So first, the first sentence in the highlighted section is, all information provided to us by others was not audited or verified and was assumed to be correct. And because the procedures were limited, we expressed no opinion or assurances of any kind on the achievability of any projected information contained herein. And this report should not be relied upon for that purpose. So let's not go and look at what may be done and say, okay, that's definitely going to be done. But let's go ahead and cherry pick those things out of this report, put them in a mailer, send them to the voters and say, this is a fact and you can count on it. Fantastic. Furthermore, there will be differences between projected and actual results. This is because events and circumstances frequently do not occur as expected. And those differences may be material. But no, we're going to take a 2010 study, we're going to grab some data out of it, we're going to call it fact, we're going to send it to the mailers, and we're going to spend a lot of money trying to influence the voters on things that we call facts but are truly myths. So I can hear the objection now. Every feasibility study has this caveat lector in the report that will generally say the same thing in every feasibility study. Not true. Here's the story. If you spend more than 0.01% of the total project value on a feasibility study, you will have a feasibility study with audited numbers, with numbers that can be counted upon, that are independently verified, and that you can actually go to the voters and say, this is what we expect. But if you do spend less than 0.01% on a feasibility study of the total project cost, $40,000 on a $42 million project, of course you're not going to have verifiable or audited numbers. And of course you should not use those numbers to affect decision making, as the study authors say you should not do that. So don't take those numbers and go show them to the voters and call them facts. Those are myths. And speaking of myths, let's talk about the latest myth. The Coca-Cola property swap, or more appropriately entitled, hey, where'd this property come from? So did you know that your tax dollars are already being put to work on the ballpark? Yes, that's in the form of a 10-year tax abatement to Coca-Cola Refreshments, to the tune of about $500,000. Now, do you know what it cost us to get the Coca-Cola property? Well, we were going to put them in the Zarges building, and that was about a $4.5 or $4.75 million building, but that building was not properly constructed, and it had a faulty foundation, which is going to cost about $1.5 million to repair. So our response was, hey, how'd you guys like a brand new $8.5 million facility? So yeah, we gave it to them. Built it and constructed it and handed it to them. Oh, then there was $600,000 in moving expenses. You got to help these guys get out of their place. And then finally, again, the $500,000 in tax abatements. So nearly $10 million was spent to get the Coca-Cola property that has a taxable value of $2.4 million. So the question is paying 4 times the taxable value the best deal for Amarillo? Gosh, I got to scratch my head on that one. And how did that happen? More importantly, how does the Amarillo Economic Development Corporation, a Type A EDC, take on a Type B project, stadium land, with no public notice and no special election, as required by law? We're still waiting for that answer. Okay, so now we're coming to the end of our election coverage, our post-election analysis on this non-binding referendum. And I just want to end with a football analogy that maybe might put this into a more succinct frame of reference. So, imagine you're in a stadium with 11,632 fans on one side and 10,812 fans on the other side. You've seen the game book, the playbook. You know these are some winning plays. You know that the prognosticators say you're favored by a field goal. So you're standing there on the 1 yard line waiting for the kickoff. The kickoff comes, you field it, you catch it, and you decided, damn, we've won this game, and you spike it right there on the 1. Now, how smart is that? I would like to draw the parallel to the non-binding referendum to say that that was a poll, an opinion poll of where the voters are. That's the beginning of the process. We're at the very beginning of the process, and if there's any mandate for anything to be done, it is compromise. Some people want a $42 million stadium. Other people do not. And if it's truly going to be a $32 million stadium, then you better count the $10 million that's already been sunk into the ground there to get the land. Okay? We're going to make this thing work one way or the other. You love Amarillo. I love Amarillo. In my opinion, this is one of the greatest cities in the country because of the people. Because the people are what make Amarillo. So we're going to make this work. Hey, you have a great day, and we'll talk soon.